Okay, I think we're ready. All right, just checking it out. This is my first live stream, so I'm trying to learn the system. So hey, and welcome. Thanks for those who are watching now on the live stream, or maybe you're just watching it after the fact and you're bored at home, doing the Corona quarantine or something like that, and you want to check out Power BI. So my name is Bobby Lansing. I'm the CEO of DevHawk, and my primary focus with the company and task in life is to bring easy to understand analytics to regular everyday people who don't understand analytics. And so I think this is a really important service because data is driving all sorts of parts of our society, especially like this coronavirus pandemic and how different countries are responding. It's all driven by data. And if we don't have enough testing, we don't have enough data and all of those different things. Well, there's also ways to dive into the data to look at insights in ways that maybe haven't been pursued before. So that's where, I forget the guy's name, but the guy who wrote the book Moneyball, which eventually became a movie, was all about how do we look at baseball players in new and unique ways to find kind of hidden meaning or hidden secrets that are there, insights that are available but just aren't being pursued well enough. So anyway, so that's where I think there's a lot of value, and so I'm sitting here at home. I've got 3 kids at home in Oregon. They're out of school. Originally it was 2 weeks, now it's 6 weeks. So I thought, hey, I'll put some information out there and see if anybody's interested in learning Power BI. It's a great opportunity while maybe business is starting to slow down or cease completely to level up your game. And I know a lot about Power BI, but there are some newer enterprise-grade features that I'm still learning, and so I figured let's learn together. So if you have any thoughts on that, send a note. I will be watching the chat if you're watching the live stream, and we'll figure it out together. Okay, great. So let's jump right in. The data set that I am using is mortality data. So this is probably terrible timing right now with what's going on in the world. But basically the National Bureau of Economic Research is compiling CDC data. So here I'll show you the CDC site as well. And basically they have all of these statistics online. I'm going to show you right here, and I'll put the link in the description later, but basically right here, mortality multiple cause files. So I saw a tweet from former President Obama a couple days ago, and it was all about how suicide is on the rise with respect to people who are in kind of manual labor jobs, and it was referencing this data set. And so I found that really intriguing because, essentially, he was advocating a very large government intervention of this problem. And so while you can debate kind of the policy side of it, I was sitting here going, I remember Statistics 101 in college, where correlation does not necessarily equal causation. So that's something that we always want to take into account when we're looking at different analytics. But then also, what does this data also tell us about the reasons that people die? And that's, again, it's very morbid, but I think it's really interesting because I don't want to use Contoso, Microsoft, normal data. I want to use real life data that has, some of the unique characteristics that real life data have. I hate how to instructional documents or videos where people don't actually use real data. They use fake data that's so perfect that it's just a couple clicks and everything's there. Well, I want to go through the process with you of actually figuring out what this data can do for us, but also the peculiarities, all the unique things that are happening within the data, and how can we maybe address those with respect to Power BI. So I'll show you the data model that I've built so far. Essentially, this is the CDC. CDC publishes this data. Then the National Bureau of Economic Research on this page republishes the data in different formats, and it goes back pretty far. So for some reason they don't have the 2018 data, though. They just have up to 2017. So I downloaded all of the CSVs. The problem is that the DAT file is a simple, it's like a comma separated values file without any of the commas. So essentially, all of the fields are a certain width of characters, and I don't know exactly what those width of characters are. And there's hundreds and hundreds of characters, so I don't want to go through and figure out, okay, the first 2 characters are for this field, the next 3 characters are for the next field, and so on. So I found a CSV file, and that's way easier to work with. All right, so then I'm going to show you here how I compiled all of this data. So the data came into this folder. So essentially I unzipped all of the files into here, and so you see here I downloaded all the way back to 1997. Though there's some unique aspects of this data that I will show you didn't necessarily work. And I'm going to open this with a different program. So it's 595 megabytes-ish. I'm going to use a program called glog to open this CSV, because it essentially opens the files, just starting from the top. It doesn't access all of the data. And I'm just going to use this so I can show you what the schema of this looks like. So you can see here we've got all of our column headers across the top, and all of the different fields therein. And I'm going to scroll a little bit to the right. And you can see here we're talking about manner of death, method of disposal, autopsy, activity, if there's an injury involved, and then the underlying cause of death, and they have different ways of coding those things, and so I'll show you kind of what those look like. So essentially, though, this is a pretty numeric data set. So all of these numbers, for the most part, are referencing other tables, and so it's essentially a lookup field that says a relational field that says code education code 40, and then we go to the other table, or I guess 4 would be a good example. We go to the other table, and 4 equals some college, but not a college graduate, something like that. So it gives us an opportunity to figure out how the demographics of the people that are dying in the country and why they're dying. So obviously the overwhelming majority of people die from natural causes. But then there's accidents, and there's homicides, and there's and suicides, and all sorts of other ways that people can die, and then lots of unknowns as well. Okay, so I'm not going to try to focus too much on the data, what the data is saying quite yet, because I think it's not only very morbid, and maybe we don't want to focus on that during all this coronavirus pandemic, but also I just want to show you that I'm using real data that's coming from a source, in this case the government. I'm a big proponent of public data, that we should be using this data more to demand transparency from our government. So this is what I'm going to do. That's my project. The problem in the data is that all the way back through 2005, so 2005, 2017, it uses the same schema, but then before that, from 2004 and before that I think to 89, it uses a different schema. Well, the different schema let's see here, it says it on the website. In one of these cases, no geographic identifiers included for the files for 2005 on due to restriction imposed by the states. So previous, you could actually get down to county level. It's like a FIPS code that would say this is the county that person resided in. The data changed basically. So between that and a bunch of other factors, the data changed. So I'm only going to focus on the recent data. It's about, when it gets into Power BI, it's almost 2 gigs worth of data, which is a lot. Power BI does a lot of compression on the data model, and so when you're hitting 2 gigs on a well-formatted, normalized database like we are, then we're really stressing the limits, at least especially of the development computer that we're using. Of course, in Power BI Premium or Power BI embedded scenarios, you can push data models up to 10 gigs. So we might do that, because we're gonna use some Power BI embedded services here in order to really work with this data. Okay, so this is where the data is coming from. I put it into a bunch of folders, as you can see here. And now let's jump into. I don't know why that's up there. So let's jump into how to live stream. I was trying to figure this out. It takes a minute to figure that out. So let's jump into what it is that we need. So we need to build a data flow. So data flows are ways to prepare data. It's basically creating your data model in the cloud so that it leverages something called the Common Data Model, or the Common Data Service, which is a Microsoft service where you're, as an entity, as a company, everybody's got disparate siloed data, and this is frustrating because you've got data that, for sales, marketing, analytics, maybe even IT administration. Like, it's all over the place, right? But they're all separate. And typically, companies do not bring all of that data together in order to have a central data source that allows you to have a common view of the world, and so of the business specifically. So in this case, what we want to do is we're going to create a common data model for this data, and you need a few things in order to get that going. I've moved the data to a server that I have, and by server I mean it's a pseudo server. It's Windows 10 Pro, but it's got 64 gigs of RAM and 2 Xeon processors from maybe 10 years ago. So it's a pretty high-powered workstation, but it is not a server. It is going to serve our data though. So what I'm going to show you here is, let's jump to the remote desktop for this. Don't look at my email. Okay. So we're going to jump onto the server real quick. And literally, this is not how I would set things up in an enterprise, but I wanted to show that I've got a separate data source that is being hosted on a server. So this could be any server, right? This is, I've got a, let's take a look here. I've got my data here in this data folder. There's my data. I've got the PBIX file that I've created is also sitting here at 1.8 gigs-ish. And so there's all of that. And then I also have the Power BI enterprise gateway running on this machine, and it's called Server 1. So again, this is a very basic example. This is not what you're going to find in enterprise, but this is getting us started. So let's go like this. I'm going to go. I have to remember where I saved everything here. So actually, in here. So here's our PBIX file. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to show you what that data model looks like. It's actually already open. All right. Okay. So I'm going to show you some of the transforms first. We'll go over the data model, and then we're going to jump to how to translate this to data flows. And again, you're going to be learning with me. I just want to show you along the way how this is built, because I don't like it when there's any secrets. And of course, if you need to ask questions, throw them in the chat. Okay, so there is a PDF that comes along with this data, and the PDF essentially explains what each field is and how what the different values mean. So I took that PDF and I created a bunch of additional tables in my database. So you can see here, for example, resident status. You have residence, intrastate, interstate. So intrastate is like somebody who dies in a different country but within this county. Somebody who dies in a different county but within the same state that they are a resident. And then interstate is somebody who is a U.S. resident but dies in a different state than they are a resident. And then foreign residence obviously is someone who's not a national citizen. Okay, so that's an example. And what I did here is these are simply data that was entered. So it is not sourced anywhere else other than created right here in Power BI. In order to create that, you hit enter data and start typing into the database. You can copy and paste Excel in here, or you can just type it out manually. So you can create additional columns, additional rows, give it a name, and hit OK, and now all of a sudden that will automatically load. In my opinion, in my experience, this is super fast, right? So essentially this takes this, it cuts this table into a binary text and stores that. So that is going to be as light as possible versus having an Excel table that references every single time is going to be is going to put additional load on the system. Again, this is small potatoes when it comes to what it is that we're dealing with. But I also want to relieve or remove as many potentials for performance degradation. So that's just one thing that I like to do. All right, so you can see here we have education codes for what kind of education the decedent had. We've got all of the different age groupings. So we've got small children all the way through. They've got different ways to slice to bucket that data. Okay, and then you can see here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but what's interesting here is underlying cause of death has 4 different tables, and these all have different codes, and some of them are related to really, like reasons why small children pass, or something that's a little bit. So here, for example, the 358 codes are everything. So this covers all of the different, so this is probably as many codes as you could find. And hold on one second, I'm going to close the door. My dog likes to push open the door while I'm working to come watch the squirrels outside. Okay, so that's essentially all of the data tables. Now let me show you what's happening to get all of these CSV files in. So this is something that most people who work with Power BI have probably seen or used before, which is I have a table, or I have a folder somewhere on my network drive, or even ideally on SharePoint, and then a SharePoint Online folder, where I have a whole bunch of CSVs, and I want to merge them all together into one giant table, and then I want to load that into my database. What's cool about that with SharePoint Online is that Power BI will create a direct connection with the SharePoint Online folder and load the data directly without having to have the enterprise gateway. So you won't have to have any on-premise infrastructure in order to maintain your data connection, which is really cool, because who wants to add extra steps to whatever it is that they're doing, right? Like who wants to add any of those like extra reasons for this whole system to fail? We want to automate as much as possible and then leave it alone ideally, or continue to iterate and improve. Okay, so what's happening here is that we have a certain source. In this case, it is a local folder, and we're going to filter hidden files. So we're going to filter it down to the data that we want. Obviously, I'm getting rid of anything older than 2005 as well, because the schema is different, and I don't really want to deal with that problem right now. There are going to be ways in the future where we can transform the files to look similar, but it is, from what I can tell between the differences of the files, it's going to be pretty difficult, and so that's not something that I want to deal with right now. All right, so we go through here, and essentially what happens is it uses a helper query up here, a function, and it expands all of those tables, so you have a table for each, and then it matches the columns and merges them all into one giant table. And so that's essentially what we get at the end here. And let me show you. So then I take that data and I do a little bit, I break it into 2 separate tables, and I do a little bit more. So we've got all of the different values as I was describing to you there. I'm going to scroll slowly. All of the different values here, minus a bunch of columns in the middle of the data that talk about these different conditions. So essentially when someone passes, they've got all these conditions, things that are wrong with them. Well, these are those conditions. What I've done essentially is unpivoted those columns. So you can see here it's out to like 20. I think, yeah, they can mark up to 20 different conditions that somebody had wrong with them when they passed. Well, these are things that we obviously want to correlate with maybe an underlying cause of death, or reasons for somebody's passing, but we don't need all 20 columns when the majority of those columns, the 20th, 19th, 18th, probably majority of them are going to be blank minus the first 1, 2, or 3 columns. So we unpivot them and filter out to remove any blank values. And so now I've got a very lean data model. I created an index column in my initial table, so now I can relate those two with the index, and I can reach out and grab those extra conditions for each row of my data, of my mort data table. Okay, so enough about the data table. You can see this is how it works. What we want to do now is translate this. So I'm going to move that to a second screen that you guys can't see, but what we want to do is translate this to what's called a data flow. So I want to create a data flow, and now I'm jumping right in here to I have to click it twice. I had to do this earlier as well, so there's obviously something wrong with it there. We're going to use this, map your data to a standard common data model entities or define custom entities instead. In any case, it uses the common data service underlying, which now makes this data accessible to a lot of other like Azure services and things like that. So now it's not just going to be locked in a Power BI data model, from my understanding. Now, if I'm wrong, please type it in the chat, but I believe that's the whole reason for using Dataflow, because then what we're going to do is link that data to AutoML. And AutoML is going to start running different algorithms and testing the effectiveness of different algorithms on this data set, so we can start to have the intelligence of machine learning to tell us what's going on and why is it either interesting or what are the correlations, all of that stuff. Okay, so we want a folder path. So now I told you that my data is sitting on, do this right here. Okay, so here my data is sitting here, and it's basically on e/data/mort data. So there's my folder path, and that's not what I want. I want it right. Where did it go? Sorry, I've lost my create entities screen. Not there. Not there. Just give me one sec. Did I close it? Oh, this is always a fun game of trying to figure out where I put all this stuff. Not there, not there. Okay. Let's try it again. Let's just start from the beginning. Here, I go into my workspace. I have separate workspaces. We'll call this a public demo, and we're going to create a data flow in here. Again, I usually, for some reason, I have to click it twice. I don't know why. We're not going to recover from cache. Obviously, it got closed somehow. I must have missed that. All right, so now here we are. We're going to create from a folder. I'm going to type the folder path, and we're going to choose that on-premise gateway that's on server 1. And then I need to have a username and password. So now I am not ashamed to say that this is my personal email. Now that you have it, because I don't know how to blur it out and I don't really care. And then the password for that account. So as long as we don't have an authentication issue, it will connect to the gateway. The gateway, it'll authenticate with that username and password, and then it will look for that folder on our gateway. And there it is. Beautiful. Oh, don't you love it when it works? I'm going to hide the bookmarks bar just to make this a little cleaner. There you go. Okay. So now we are looking at all of the files that are in there. So what we want to do is transform the data, because essentially I want to copy and paste the queries, advanced editor. So I want to copy and paste the queries from Power BI into here. So look, I've got Mort Data 2005. We're going to call it Advanced Editor. We're going to copy all of this except for that first row, because obviously we're using a different folder location. Paste. Try again. Copy. Paste. Good. And always need to add this comma. One of those nice fun things about syntax in Power Query. Okay. So there's 2005. So I'm going to also mirror the names over so that this doesn't get broken. So we're going to call it Mort Data 2005. And the import transform file, table source. Okay, so we'll step it through and figure out what we did wrong. So here's source, filter, sort the rows. I sort the rows because I wanted the newest file on top. Okay, and there we hit a transform. So this is happening because I don't have any of my helper functions in here. So let's see if we can get helper functions added there. Let's go. Actually, let's do this. This is gonna be cool. I'm gonna duplicate it. So this is gonna be a throwaway. I'm going to do this. Okay. transform file has the error. There it is. Okay, so invokes custom function because the custom function doesn't exist. So let's see if we can create a function. We're going to create a function without parameters. We're going to go to the advanced editor and grab. Actually, you know what? I think there's a way to auto create this. Let's cancel this. I believe the way to auto create this is to go here and expand that content, and let's see what that does. Okay, let's see if I can get that function to create itself. So if this doesn't work, then what we'll do is try to copy over the text from the function. Essentially, here's the function. If we go to advanced editor, I'm going to continue. Here's our function. So I'm just going to copy that function. It's called transform space file. So let's just do that. So we're going to see how effective this is. It may not work. So the other option, which would be really interesting to do in order to create that, that function, is to get the data from the folder and follow along the procedure. Basically, I mean, it's essentially doing what I just did right now, which is to take the content, hit that button, and it's going to create the, it's going to automatically create those steps for us. So I'm going to give this another few seconds, and then I'll try to error out of it and see if we can just start a different one. Let me see if I can do this real quick. Let's go. I'm going to get rid of this. So I'd like to open up a new tab because this might be stuck. Who knows if that's actually working right. So we're going to create a data flow. And it might tell me like, hey, your stuff's broken. Would you like to recover from cache? No, I'm going to add new entities. All right, so let's try this again one more time. It's right here. Okay. There, it already saved everything. That's nice. All right, here we go. We're going to go transform data. I'm just going to go create this manually, and then we can copy and paste the rest of it. And that should create the functions that we're looking for. So here I'm going to unselect all except for, let's just do the last date, because I don't want you guys to have to wait for every single row to load, because it's a lot of data. All right, here we go. So now we're going to combine files, create the queries. It should, there you go, transformation. So it's creating the transform sample file. And then once we have all that built, then we can copy and paste from the old data model. I'm going to close this other tab. I'm going to leave it. There we go. Okay, beautiful. Oh, I love it when it works. There we are. All right, so now we're going to go back here, look at this data, go advanced editor and copy and paste, because I do not want to redo all of this work. Let's copy that, go advanced editor. So the web interface, this is my first experience with the web interface, and this is pretty cool. There's a lot going on here. So now if I take this and I just hit OK, it should just load all the way through. Import transform file. So we're going to go through here again. There's our sorted rows. Invoked custom file. It had an error again, which it obviously didn't before. Can I undo? All right, so you see the mistake in the way that I did that. Let's do this one more time. And yes, I have crazy people at home due to schools shutting down, like I said, for 6 weeks. So you can probably hear them behind me just going nuts. But my wife is there, so don't worry, they're not being neglected. I'm going to do this one more time. And we're going to go OK. Alright, so I'm going to look to see what this does. Right here. Oop, don't do that actually. That might cause an issue because I didn't filter the rows. And it's creating a separate fill function. What it typically does in these things is it'll sample each file and figure out what all of the headers need to look like, which headers are the same, which ones are different. It creates all sorts of them, which is why you see here now we've got all of these new header types, counties, county titles, and all sorts of stuff. What I wanted to do with all of that, though, is see how this custom function is invoked to see, yeah, it has an error as well. Oh, I see. Because these two are fine, these other ones are not. So here, if I look at invoke custom function, we've got errors across. Alright, you know what needs to happen, right? Oh, sorry. I'll make it quick. This is the downside of live streaming, right? Which is that you're going to have to see all the gory details here about how this works. And this is unfortunately my what happens when I'm developing Power BI reports as well, is that you get into something and then you realize that you got to back out of it, and it's back and forth. It is an iterative process to figure this out. We're just going to go 2017. Going to make this nice and easy here. I'm not going to screw around anymore with it. So basically we're going to use this, create a separate column, and then I'm just going to follow along in what I did previously to get to this data set, and we'll just go one line at a time, and I'll just kind of toggle back and forth here. This is sometimes just the easiest way to do it. Alright, so whatever that was, it worked. So invoke the custom function. You see you get a table here as the transform file, not an error, which is ideal. It expands, and now we've changed column types. So let's pick up here. Here's expanded transform file. What I'd like to do, because before that's just this, so what I'd like to do is copy and paste the rest of this, because I think the rest of this is going to work. So advanced editor, we go expanded transform file is where we're going to pick up right here. So removed columns. I'm going to advanced editor. We don't need to change column types yet, so I'm going to get rid of that part. And expanded transform file, expanded table column. So you see there's where we have a difference of what's happening. Let me go back. Expanded transform file, removed other columns, renamed columns. Yeah, so I think we're okay here. So I'm going to, and so then the only thing is this needs to match right here. Because essentially, the way if you're reading along here, you set this as a variable, right, or an object. So for folder.files, and there's our folder name. That equals source. Now source gets imported into the next line, then filtered rows comes down to the next line, then filtered hidden files. So what's interesting is that if I picked up source all the way down here, then it's going to basically ignore all of the steps in between. So that's why you want to make sure if you're manually adjusting this, that you have your commas in place and that you have the rows moving from one to the next properly. And this is going to be called More Data 2005. Okay, so there's our data set. So that's step one. So now what I really like about this now is that I am going to go down here to Mort Data, to an advanced editor, and copy all of this, because it's essentially just sourcing Mort Data 2005. And now this becomes easy because I'm going to create a blank query. I'm going to paste. I'm going to give it a name as more data. Okay. So I've got to hear a thing about premium. We'll get into that in a few minutes. So what happened here is that we're renaming some columns. And it's not, we've got some column name differences. So essentially this doesn't exist anymore. In the example that I had given it, these basically they had weird names, obviously. So if I go like this, now we should see all of that pop through just fine. The columns rename. Okay, here we've got the same thing. So we don't have these. Okay, sorry, we're going to have to debug real quick. Make sure that this is all working properly. There you go. So now everything needs to change. So I'm going to have to get rid of all of these transform file name dots. Okay, so basically, if you're watching along after the fact, feel free to fast forward a little bit. All right, you see what I did here. So this came through as a number or text. What is that? That is data type. Let me see. Age should come through as text for the moment. I don't want it to take on a number quite yet, because I'm actually going to split it. So what should be happening here is if I split column by position, so essentially starting at 0, at position 0, which is the first position, I split it to 1, is what should be happening. And what's something is not happening here. As far left as possible, split characters. So basically I peel off the first number. However, age, I think, is being represented by numbers right now, so I'm going to have to deliberately say that it's text. You should see that make it work. Okay, now it'll split the column, no problem. There you go. So if it's type 1, then it's in years. If it's type 2, then it's in months and days and so forth and so on. And if it's 9, then it is completely confused. All right, so now we should have a few more column names that are confused that I'll clean up here real quick, and we'll be off and running. So I won't bring in all of the other tables right now. I'm just going to show you how we create this data flow, right? So this is now the data flow, and then we're going to link this to here, watch. I'm smarter than this, right? Here we go. Okay. All right. So then we're going to link this to a Power BI report. And actually what we'll do is we can bring it into the report that we're already using, and I'll show you essentially what that'll look like. And so what's cool about this is, this isn't going to, let's see, this isn't going to want this, is it? It's going to say those columns don't exist. Yep, there you go. Okay, same thing. Okay. Just cleaning up my mess. Apologies for the wait. All right, last one. hopefully at least you can appreciate the authenticity, right? This is not a caged demonstration where everything works perfect. That stuff happens, it's reality, so I like to show that that's part of the struggle here. But it's worth it because now our data is sitting here in a really nice table, completely cloud hosted. We've got an error on our age column, so I'm going to debug that real fast. And then we're going to import this into Power BI. And basically, I split the column. I added a custom. Where it is age, here it is. Okay. So if, there it is. So I want that. I'm going to clean all these up, and it'll only take a second compared to copying and pasting it. Actually, no, it'll be faster this way. So what's funny here, and I actually still need to fix this, but you see here that some ages are 9999, which means that they don't have the data, right? What I think that is what I'm replacing. It starts at each if, so it should start each there. So now let's go all the way to the end. It is having an issue with that. So what's interesting is when you add a custom column in the Power BI itself, right? Let's go like this. Advanced editor. I'm just going to look in here real quick. We're going to debug. Sometimes you just got to debug the text of these things because whatever they're giving us isn't working. So it was table.column. What's probably happening here is that whatever that is needs to go away because it is there it is. Okay. And it brings in that, but that should only have one quote around it. There it is. And age should only have one quote around it because that's the name of our column. Okay. Is this the real thing, or is this just fantasy? Get rid of that quote there. Okay, try that. Did it work? It did not work. Where didn't it work? Let's go. I always like to compare to the one that works. So we're on added custom. So essentially, let's just do this. This is what I need to copy and paste into added custom. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to replace all that crap. I'm going to go here. So added custom should look like that. There it is. Should be beautiful now. Ah ha ha ha. Okay. There it is. Now you have an age column. Okay. So save and close. Validating output schemas for your queries to ensure they can be loaded. We don't want to load the first table because that's now going to load all of that data twice, and we only need it once. So this is all just part of being smart. So we're going to hit save here for just a sec. All right. Save your data flow. Let's do it. Let's call it more data. I believe it was saved, but I'm going to hit yes and see where we're at. So this, let's see if I can edit entity, and it should take me back into Power Query, yes. And I'm going to right click this bad boy and disable load, uncheck enable load. Now it's only going to bring in more data. So it's going to validate the query. So I think this is really cool stuff because now we're going to host a data model even, or a data I mean, well, common data service, common data model. It's a data model for lack of a better term, though we haven't done necessarily relationships or anything like that quite yet. In the cloud, and I can have multiple Power Query or Power BI reports that reference this data, right? So that's where things are really cool now, because I can go into Power BI. Let's see, I'm going to do this the first time I've ever done it. We'll see how easy this is. Sometimes these things are intuitive, Microsoft, sometimes they're not. You know this. I'm going to go into my, I'm fighting with the system, hold on. Okay, I want to get data. All right, my Power BI is acting up, which happens from time to time. This is why you must always save often. Save early, save often, because sometimes you'll get hosed by the Microsoft demons. They'll get you. Okay. We're going to get data. So now I should be able to point to a data flow. So if I type in data, it should pop up. Flow. There it is. Power BI data flows. Connect. Ah, the old sign-in screen. Let's sign in. Connect. So now more data should show up as a Power BI data flow. Public demo, there we are. More data, there it is. There's the table that we just created, more data. So now I want to transform data. I don't want to load it quite yet because that's going to take a long time. And I don't want you to sit here and wait for this. But what I'm going to do is look at what the query looks like on the back end now. So if I go here to Advanced Editor, here is the Power Query information that I'll need to replace what is now sitting in my data model. So here, let's show you what that looks like. So let's go here. Now, of course, we've got some weird things going on in this Power BI report. So let's see if it works. Yes. If I go Advanced Editor, and I'm going to now paste this in, okay? It might ask me to connect on this side. We'll see if that works. You see the column names will change a little bit, which might throw off a few of the tables that I've already built, but I was just playing around with some visualization, so it doesn't matter if I need to just clean those up. I don't like the column names where it has the transform file dot in front of it anyway, so this will be cleaner. Okay, so now if I hit refresh preview, I should see all of this get updated. Let's check it out. No. Try it again. Okay, yes, so that's there. Let's go, let's do this. I'm gonna disable load on this other table, because essentially that's the only other one that requires this to load. I don't want you guys to have to wait for that, so I'm just gonna disable that for a minute, and we are going to load that here. Now it's creating a connection to data model. So now what should happen is, ideally, all of that data from my server was loaded into the Power BI data flow service. So it should be sitting now in that data model. And by connecting the table to this PBIX file, it's now just going to download data, loading data to model. So it should just download it into the model here. It shouldn't have to do all of the transformations that I already created, right? So now let's check this out. And this is where I might need to go offline and do some testing. However, what I should see here is my data model, which I see here but with 0 rows. So this is where it probably needs a little bit of, I'm actually going to stay online and do some troubleshooting here, because what might need to happen, let's take a look. Edit entity, apply, properties, incremental refresh. So I believe what needs to happen now is that we need Microsoft Azure to the rescue. So here I am at portal.azure. We need to create a Power BI embedded license for this to run off of. And I'm going to show you what that looks like, because so here's the reality. I want to play around with this, right? I can't buy premium on a $6,000 a month license billed annually, because that's a lot of money for me to just play around with this. However, I can spend a few bucks to do an hour or two on Power BI embedded. So I'm going to create Power BI embedded real fast, assign that license to this workspace, and then we're off and running. So this is going to be, we're going to do Dataflow. The F is not capital. We're going to call it A1. They have all these different sizes. Lowercase. Sorry, my bad. Okay. Change size. Look, these are all the different sizes, and you can see the monthly estimated costs will pop up here in a second. Eventually, I'll need to be up at A4, which is going to be your equivalent to the premium license. You can see here the cost is about the same. Actually, I think the premium might be $5,000 a month, and this is about $6,000 a month, because premium you're paying annually. So you get to save a little bit of money by spending a lot of money. Okay, so this is $750 a month. I'm just going to play around with it here. So let's just give this a try. Review and create. We're validating. We're going to get a button here to create here in a second. And then we're going to go into the Power BI service and apply that to the workspace, I believe. There it is. Okay, deployment's underway, so let's give that a minute or two. Essentially, here, while that's doing it, I can come in here. So here, we need to assign the workspace to a dedicated capacity. I kind of know what I'm talking about sometimes. But now where to do that? We'll see. Oh, no, that's not what I want. There's all my workspaces. Where is premium capacity? Capacity settings. I'll check over here to see we're still deployment underway. All right, Power BI embedded. So there it is setting up. So what we're going to do then is assign this to the public demo workspace, and then we are ready. And I'm just going to keep streaming here while things are working. And oh, good, deployment's complete. This should be here in a sec. I don't like to refresh because these things tend to actually alert you when they're ready. So I don't want to push my luck. But you see here, it doesn't take that long. I mean, this is, I've been streaming for 53 minutes now, and there it is, active. All right. So if I click the capacity, let's assign a workspace. Specific the entire organization's workspaces. Apply. That's fine. It's a specific capacity, so if it applies to the whole workspace, that's fantastic. If I'm an organization, for example, if I'm developing, I'm going to put this in quotes, if I'm developing a software as a service analytics platform, which I am, which is based on Power BI, and it's going to allow my customers to access these reports in an embedded fashion, then I can create a workspace for each individual client that I work with. And now that I can assign that capacity, I'll only have to scale the capacity as my clients scale, which ideally, if I'm smart enough, I can have them pay for, right, through my costing and all of that stuff. Okay, so now we are applied. So if I go back to my data flow right here, I'm going to do incremental refresh. Actually, I just want to refresh the whole darn thing. How do I do that? Custom, edit, apply, and properties. I'm going me go edit real quick, and I want to see what more data looks like, what my table looks like at the end of this. Okay, so I have data in the tables. You see that? You can see it too, just like me. We'll Google it while we're waiting. Table is empty. This is an issue somebody else has had before. They're going to say you need to assign a please refresh the Dataflow on service to make data loaded into the entity. Then click refresh button navigator. Okay, that makes sense. But how? Save and close. I want to refresh now. There it is. Refreshing the data. Okay. So you can see how this is going to work. What I'm going to do next is, actually I'm going to save it for tomorrow because I'm almost at an hour. I think an hour is enough for all of us. Tomorrow I'm going to go through the process of applying device settings. Maybe I want to see, don't save, I didn't make any changes. Refresh in progress, there we go. I'm going to go through the process of figuring out what the AutoML is capable of. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to finish this refresh, and I'm going to pause my dedicated Power BI dedicated license or subscription that I just put in Azure so that I'm not paying all night for services that I'm not using. And then tomorrow I'll reactivate them, and we'll go through the process of what does AutoML look like for this this data specifically. And what I'm going to do in the meantime as well is I'm going to add all of those individual tables that are relationships for this data, because I want AutoML to be able to export real live words to me. I mean, that's the goal, right? So we'll see if it's capable of it, but I want it to tell me the underlying cause of death is related to these causal factors of, maybe age, race, ideally location in the country would have been nice too, but my data doesn't have that, activity, injury, whatever else. I'm trying to think of what other columns are in there. There's all sorts of other columns in there. Education, yeah. So we'll see what's possible. We're gonna test that part of AutoML, and then maybe on the third day we'll do some visualization. And what I'd like to do, ultimate goal, is to publish all of this to not only my work, but all of the data, all of the PBIX reports. I want this data to be discoverable by everybody. I think that from what I can tell, it's really hard to work with open source government data. It's open source, but it's also in some proprietary format that they don't even tell you what it is. So luckily, the NBER, the Economics Research Organization, is publishing CSVs with the accompanying explanation files. It's giving you a leg up there, but my God, this is a lot of work just to be able to go through and now visualize and explain mortality in the US. So that's the next steps for the project. I'm going to save it for tomorrow, which will be Thursday, March 19th. So today is March 18th. It's a beautiful day outside. I'm going to go get in the backyard with the kids, and we're going to plant some tomato plants or something like that. So hopefully you're staying healthy and calm during the coronavirus pandemic. Pandemic is a very scary word, though it just means lots of people sick in lots of different places. If you're under 60, there's not much to worry about. If you're over 60 and you're in good health, then there's probably less to worry. There's not much to worry about. But if you have underlying health conditions, then there's unfortunately something to worry about. So wash your hands, stay safe, and we'll talk tomorrow. Send me any comments or questions that you have in the meantime. All right, thanks, and I will sign off for now. See ya.